Hello, thank you very much for joining me for another video. Today I would like to talk about my first impressions with this, the Vive Pro. Now, when this was first announced, I wasn't all that bothered about it. I certainly wasn't interested in getting one right away. And that might have been because this latest offering from HTC didn't look that much different from the one I was already using and had been quite happily using for a number of years. But in all the times that I was flying through space or barreling around a racetrack, I couldn't help but ask myself, what would it be like if the graphics were crisper, or if the text was more readable, or if the screen door wasn't a thing? Well, curiosity got the better of me, so I decided to spend 800 of my hard-earned pounds on the Vive Pro. And I'm really glad I did, because this thing's actually quite good. So before I start talking about what it's like inside the headset, I want to cover what it's like on the outside and what HTC have done to improve things there. Of course, the most obvious change is the hard strap that replaces the floppy cloth job that came with the original Vive. Now, of course, we could replace the original Vive strap with the Dulux audio strap, which, as far as I can tell, performs a similar function. However, that isn't a road that I went down, so I can't really comment on that. Getting in and out of the Vive Pro is a lot easier than it was with the Vive 1, because it is now a simple case of lift that up, put your face in the hole, bring that back down, and then tighten it. And of course the reverse to get back out again. This also has another benefit for anybody like myself who wears glasses, because interactions with the old Vive and those sweat-filled foam padding would leave really opaque smears all across your glasses, which meant you gotta clean them off all the time, or at least that's what I found. But with the new system there is none of that going on, because it encourages you to put the thing on in a different way, as in you kind of insert it onto your face like that rather than trying to drag it down over the front. The rest of the unit is fairly self-explanatory. The IPD adjustment is the same as the old Vive, and there's now double the number of cameras on the front. We also have a sliding mechanism for adjusting the distance of the lenses, as opposed to the original Vive's twist dial thing which it had located on the sides. But there's something else interesting regarding this aspect. With the original Vive, I couldn't dial the lenses all the way back before they hit my glasses. I always had to keep them a couple of clicks out. But with the Vive Pro, I can bring it back as far as it'll go with no problems whatsoever. Now, it might be wishful thinking to assume that I'm getting a little more FOV out of this. I suspect the actual real reason is because there's not as much range adjustment on the Vive Pro, which could be a measure to help comfort with people who wear glasses. Either way, I'm not actually noticing any difference in the FOV anyway, so it's kind of a moot point, but I thought it'd be interesting to bring up. Now, as far as other changes go on the exterior, other than the fact that it's blue, the other major changes with the audio. The Vive Pro does actually come with some inbuilt earphones, but as you can see, mine doesn't have them. Instead, it's sporting these little caps. This is a really nicely thought out feature, as HTC have recognised that the built-in earpieces aren't going to be for everyone and have made them very easy to remove. There are no wires to disconnect and no fiddly things to muck around with. Instead, the earpieces use terminal contacts, which can then be covered up by the caps provided. So the sound quality from these earpieces isn't actually all that bad, but I found that they don't fit very firmly on my ears, which means that all of the bass leaks out and makes them sound quite tinny indeed. There are ways around this. For example, you can get 3D printed clips such as this one from Thingiverse, which hold the cans tighter to your ears, improving the bass. However, they do also negate the earpiece's ability to click out like that, which then means the headset is harder to get in and out of. Personally, I don't need these things because I've got a Sennheiser Dolby DAC, which I plug a nice set of earbuds into. Now, it's worth mentioning that I wouldn't usually favour earbuds over the rest of my Sennheiser headset. However, I can't get it to fit over the Vive Pro's hard strap comfortably, as the strap itself is quite wide. This is a bit of a downside to the hard strap, but there is a silver lining here too, because it means there's nothing whatsoever pushing on the sides of my head, which adds even more to the comfort factor. In terms of microphone then, well, the Vive Pro has got one built in just underneath the headset, just like the original Vive did. However, quality-wise, this thing is not going to rock your world. At the other end of the cable there is of course the link box, and this has had some improvements as well. So firstly, we've got a proprietary interface on the front, which is because the Vive uses a single cable rather than three glued together. On the back we're using a DisplayPort rather than a HDMI, but by far my favourite improvement is the addition of a power button, which means that the Vive Pro can be disconnected from the PC without having to actually physically unplug anything. Now, this thing was really easy to set up. Coming from a Vive environment already, all I did was unplugged my old Vive, plugged in the Vive Pro and switched Steam VR on, and that was it. The process was completely seamless. If you're coming from a different platform or this is your first voyage into VR, then the setup of this is also very straightforward. I mean, I didn't have to do it this time around, but from what I can remember from setting up my original Vive, it was a very straightforward process. So that's it really for the outside and the ergonomics of the Vive Pro. Let's talk about what it's like inside the headset. Of course, the main selling point for this device is the increase in resolution, but before I get into that, it's worth making some observations about the actual bit your face goes into. First off, HTC have improved the nose seal, and although the original one wasn't bad, I did find the corners of it would sometimes wander up into the bottom of my vision. No such issues here though with this new split overlap design. Light sealing on the whole is excellent, as it was really with the original one, and the unit is really comfortable to wear with glasses. The optics appear to be the same as the original Vive, at least as far as I can tell, and I haven't read anything to the contrary that comes from a reliable source. Whatever the case may be in this regard, it's clear that they're still Fresnel lenses, so expect some God rays and glaring in high contrast situations. Personally, God rays don't really bother me as much as lens clarity does, and unfortunately I've got to report that the Vive Pro seems to suffer with the same clarity or peripheral blurring problems that the original Vive did. Now, I know this sounds like a bit of a deal breaker, but let me clarify what I actually mean here. The lenses are absolutely sharp as a pin when you're looking straight forward. It's only when you start to look around the scene with your eyes that you'll notice the clarity starts to drop off. Like I said, this isn't a deal breaker. It's something that, like the screen door, you can kind of learn to live with, and given the immersion benefits as a whole, it's certainly worth doing that. Speaking of screen door, let's talk about resolution. The Vive Pro offers up 1440 by 1600 pixels per eye, as opposed to the original's 1080 by 1200, and of course this increased resolution is delivered at 90Hz via dual AMOLED displays. The increased resolution has a profound effect on the VR experience, much more so than I would have first imagined. Text is infinitely more readable. The details in textures are crystal clear close up and still really legible at a decent distance. The screen door effect as well is greatly diminished, although not completely eliminated like some might claim. It is far less noticeable. The OLED screens themselves serve up colours in an incredibly flawless way. They're deep and vivid. There's loads of contrast. I mean, I play Elite Dangerous a lot with this thing, and that's a game of bright stars set against the blackness of space. Games like Project Cars 2 also come out really well with lots of bright, vivid colours, lots of nice detail. Now, it's worth noting at this point that I'm using some pretty old hardware. My i7 is 4th gen, memory and motherboard are of the DDR3 variety, and my GTX 1080 has been superseded by more powerful offerings. However, this rig can still run the Vive Pro no problem. I had to dial SteamVR super sampling down to 100% where I had it set at 200% with my old Vive, but despite this, the graphics fidelity is still vastly improved. So to wrap up then, would I recommend the Vive Pro? Ultimately yes, I certainly would, but does that mean that you should jump on the internet right now and order one? I'm afraid that's going to depend entirely on your circumstance. If you're a Vive user and you've got a load of money you just don't know what to do with, then definitely go out and get one of these. It's the same Vive experience except better. If, however, you're coming from a different platform or this is your first venture into VR, then you're going to need to weigh up the cost because this thing is not cheap, and in that scenario you're going to want the full gear, which is going to run you into 4 figures. So in short, if you are in the market for VR, I would certainly recommend trying whatever you can get your hands on, but in my humble opinion, the Vive Pro is definitely a good product. It's very solid, it's very polished, you're not going to have a bad experience with it. That's pretty much all I've got to say on the matter, so thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you next time. Goodbye.